Project for today is going to be this 2004 Polaris Trail Boss 330. I picked this up at an auction, and I'm thinking that it runs, but their main issue was, well, I was missing the chain, so I was thinking the transmission was maybe locked up, but I found that I can spin the sprocket even when it's in reverse. So we have no reverse gear. And then the forward gear, that catches. So there's something wrong in that transmission. I've never busted one of those open, so I think we'll make this one to learn off of. I'll tear that transmission apart and see what's going on in there. But first off, I want to get the fuel system cleaned up and get it running. It sat at the auction place with this broken cap for probably about a month, so it was getting a bunch of water down in there. I looked down in the tank and there was a bunch of water in it. And then the fuel shutoff here, both the lines are busted off of the shutoff and they're dripping a little bit of water out of there, you can see. So we'll replace that, and then I'll get the fuel tank cleaned out, and then I'll drain the carburetor. We'll just see if we can get it to run that way. I don't know if we'll have to dig into the carburetor or not. And then we'll work on getting that transmission dealt with. But first off, I think I'm gonna tear the plastics off of it, because I gotta do that to get to the transmission anyway, so it'll make it a little bit easier working on. I think I could probably just take the rear plastics off. Put this seat off of here. I'll have to take this rack off. Yeah. That one was really in there. Normally you can just hit down on those and pop them tabs out, but that one was really stuck in there. We'll have to take these wheel wells out of there also to get the rear fender off. I could just unbolt it here, but I think I need to get it out of there to get that transmission out. Just got a line of bolts up the side here. Or actually, this one's just got the one. And there's one over there. It should be everything out of that, off of that wheel well or foot well. Slides out. We'll have to do the same thing to the other side, and then we can start taking the rear fenders off. Now I'm going to take the rear rack off. You probably could leave the rear fenders on. It's just going to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more room to move around. That rack is a little bit twisted. Now we can actually get at the fenders. Unplug that taillight. Well, we got a couple of Torx head bolts back there. One thing about Polaris, they use a lot of different fasteners. They got metric and standard and Torx and Allen heads. Don't really want to use the impact on these ones. They're actually fairly loose. There we go. I think before I go too much farther, I'll get this fuel petcock changed out, and then we'll get that gas tank cleaned out and everything and see if we can get it fired up. These lines still feel okay. I think I'm just going to cut the ends off. Oop. Got one more line hooked to it. The line from the fuel pump. Got our new valve here. Slide this line on under here. Put it back up through. So this line here was disconnected from the fuel pump, it looks like. And this valve just has the two coming from the tank. The new valve didn't come with the nut, so I'll have to reuse this old one. I'm not going to hook those lines up quite yet because I want to get the tank cleaned out. I don't want to end up putting that watery fuel into the fuel pump. So I'm basically just going to take one of these grabbers and I'll grab it on a rag on there and stuff it down in. I can see where the water is down in there. I'll soak all that up, and then we'll blow it out with a bunch of air. Make sure it's good and dry. You could take the tank off, but there's a lip underneath the cap there, so they're not the easiest to really get drained out. And the reserve line is pretty much in the bottom of this tank in the front. So if you disconnect that line, you get most of it drained out, but then you just got to clean up the residual. It kind of smells like somebody put like heat or something in here, which I don't really recommend for engines like this. That stuff is good at making plastic brittle, and rubber will get kind of hardened out from it because it's so much ethanol. I'll continue doing that and bring you back when I get it dried out. Well, I got it pretty much dried out with rags. I'm gonna blow some air through it, get it dried out the rest of the way. Well, I got it dried out and I dumped about a gallon of gas in there. Then I just put some pliers on these lines to pinch them off. I'm going to drain some gas through. Make sure we don't have any water in these lines. She got a couple little drops out of that one. Try this other one. One of them is a reserve, so it's got a lower line in the tank. That one we didn't get any water out of. So we'll hook these lines back up. Put this piece back on. And I'll drain the carburetor and we should be ready to try firing it up. So to drain the carburetor is just a screw up underneath here. You probably can't see it too good with the lighting the way it is, but you can see the screwdriver on it there. And you can kind of see it draining down. And if there was any water in the float bowl, that should drain it. But we'll see. Still might end up having to go through the carburetor if it got water in there. So, well, I've got a mediocre battery in there and the charger's on it, so we'll see if it'll fire up. It doesn't run too bad. We'll have to see when we actually are able to ride it if that needs any more work in that carburetor, but it did seem like once it ran a little bit it started getting a little snappier. So now we gotta start digging into getting this transmission out of here. I've taken a couple of them out, but this one is a little bit different than ones I've done. This is pretty much all it is the one shift linkage for forward and reverse. It's a pretty simple transmission. There's not too much to it. It's just a forward reverse. There's no high low or anything like that. But looks like we got a couple brackets back here and then down in there. Then we'll have to go to the other side and take the clutch cover off, take the secondary clutch off. And it does look like down in here the swing arm connects to it back in there. So I'll have to probably have to take the swing arm out. Maybe leave the shock connected. I can just slide it out and that'll give us enough room to get the transmission out of there. It was already missing the chain, so we don't have to do anything with that. I'll get what we need to do that and start tearing into it. First thing I'm going to do is take this clutch cover off. Pretty much after that, it's just a bunch of 3/8 bolts. Well, the primary clutch looks okay. It's got some wear to it where the belt rides there, but other than that, it's not too bad. These you can just work the belt off like that. The belt doesn't look too bad. Well, it's got a chunk out of the belt there. These are pretty low powered machines though. Even with that, it would probably last it a long time. We'll pull, I think we're gonna have to pull the primary because we need to get this out of here, the back of the clutch cover, so we can get a 1/2 inch for that. Pop the secondary off first. Now these do have threads in them to put a puller in. A lot of times these do get stuck. They're just a straight shaft, but they'll still get stuck like that. I've got a puller here for these. I'll spray a little lube in those threads. This has already got some grease on the threads on the puller. A lot of times you don't even need to use a wrench on these. There we go. And this is a spline shaft here, so I usually will put a little anti-seize on those when I put it back on. The primary clutch with the tapered shaft, I usually just leave that dry. The primary is just a 5/8 bolt here. And I got the puller for that, which I usually do put a little grease in there. Now, a lot of people tell you not to use a impact on these pullers, but you can. You just have to kind of know when to stop. You don't want to sit there and hammer on them really hard. It's not good for the puller or the threads in the clutch. But something like this, it came off super fast. I didn't even really get that much pressure on it, so it's fine with something like that. But if you're gonna sit and hammer on it for a long time, if it's really not coming off of there, it's not good for them. And this puller, not so much because it's such a thick end on it, but I have seen where guys hammer on them so hard at the impact, the end will just bend on the puller, and then it'll even sometimes get stuck in the clutch, so then it just causes you a lot more of a headache. All right, now we can take that inner clutch cover off. That exposes that side of the transmission. So it looks like we got to take this off. I'm just going to take this bracket maybe just so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. Just run them bolts back in so we don't lose them. So this should thread out, and then we got a bolt here for a mount. I think I'm gonna go take that linkage off the other side so that's free. Then we'll get some jack stands under here because it's gonna have to drop that rear swing arm out, I'm thinking. I'm not sure if I can get it up high enough to slide it out. I might have to take the air box out if I go that route. I'm just gonna take the bolt out of the linkage here. Lay that down there, unplug the wiring there. And we got a mounting bolt down here. I think I'll do the swing arm next. So I'll get a jack under there and some jack stands. So it looks like this one I should be able to remove the air box, and then I don't have to remove the whole swing arm. I just took the bolt out on the other side. And I'm thinking it should come out the other side. The older ones, you could get it, weasel it out the side, but I wasn't sure about this one if we could or not, so we'll see what happens. And we'll take this vent tube off down here. Give us a little bit more room. Take this top one off first. I'm going to take these brackets here off. And we got a mounting bolt down in here. That one. There's one on the other side, and I think there might be one underneath. Yeah, that one right there goes through. I'll have to get that one. I'll go zip the one out of this side. And I got this bolt under here. This is kind of a stabilizer here for the, when you get the torque on the chain, it'll twist the transmission. So that presses against the frame to help keep it from doing that. Have to run that in some to be able to get it out of there. Alright, I got a couple wrenches on that bottom bolt. It'll give you much room to work down here. So this bracket right here has to come off. I already took one of the bolts off, was back there. That was in the way to get that bottom mount bolt. And then looks like there's a bolt up here, and that should come out, and that'll give us enough room to come over and up and out. So that bracket had one bolt here that could be removed, and then the other one was a welded bolt through the motor mount. So I took the nut off of that, and it was enough to be able to pivot that mount. So now it should come out of there. There we go. Lost the shims off of a couple of the shims off of the secondary clutch side. I guess it was just one of them. I'll probably pull those off, put them with the clutch. Make sure we keep our belt spacing correct. Alright, now we'll get it on the bench and I'll clean it off a little bit and we'll crack it open and see what we got going on in there. I did drain the oil out of this before I cleaned it off, and then there's probably still going to be some in there, but looks like we got a couple of pry points. And from what I've looked on the part schematics, it looks like if you take this cover off, all the gears should stay like that. And we got some gunk in there, not too bad actually. So what I'm seeing here actually looks like it's going to be a relatively easy fix. There should be a snap ring right here. This gear should not be able to move up and down. So this collar here slides up and the teeth contact in this gear, and that's what makes it go into reverse, and then it slides down and it goes to that gear, and that is what's forward gear. So the forward gear is run by this chain, and then this bigger gear, or the narrower gear on the top, is your reverse. And everything looks okay other than it's missing that snap ring, and this gear was actually popped up when I took it apart and I just tapped it down. So I'm gonna have to get this bearing off and then find a snap ring that fits that, and we should be back in business actually. I was really expecting this gear to be broke or something, or the teeth in here to be worn off on this collar. Even the shift fork doesn't look like it has a heck of a lot of wear. They'll wear a big groove in there if they're getting wore out. So I think we got lucky on this one. I'll get something to pull that bearing off with, and then we'll go from there. Well, I got a puller set up on here. It's not the best setup, but I can't really get behind it to get a hook on this centerpiece like you'd want. So I'm gonna put I got a little bit of pressure on it. I'm gonna put a little bit more. Let's see if it'll start moving. I think it must be moving. Before I get to this spot, I'm going to clean that up with the wire wheel so it slides past there. Alright, I got that shaft cleaned up. I'm gonna wash this out in the parts washer, so I wasn't too worried about getting too much stuff in there. We'll make sure we get it all cleaned up before I put it back together. The bearing still feels okay. So our snap ring is there still. It's right here, just kind of buggered up. So I'll take that one off, and then I'll take this one off and find a replacement for it. And you can see it's bent. I don't really know what would cause that. I've never seen anything quite like that where a snap ring just pops out of the groove like that. The only thing I could think of is if they tried to jam it in reverse, maybe while they were moving, and there was a lot of torque on it and it slapped into gear. Might have pushed too hard on it and popped that snap ring out. I don't know. That's kind of a odd one. There's still a little bit of movement in there. I might try putting a shim or something in there so it's not quite so sloppy. That might be what our problem was, is it got I don't think it should be completely tight, but it shouldn't be that loose. I'll try to find something I can put in there, like a clutch shim or something. Here, I put a small extra shim in there. Now we still have a little bit of movement, but it's nothing like it was. There was like an 1/8 inch of play in that. So I think we're ready to wash it up now, get the rest of that old oil and gunk out of there, and then we'll have to clean up the gasket surface and put a bead of anaerobic gasket maker on there. These machine surfaces like this, I don't really like to use silicone. If it's squirting inside and getting in the gears and stuff, it can cause issues. So I usually use a Permatex Anerobic. I'll show you once I get started doing that. It doesn't really ever dry completely with the parts that stick out. It dries more from the compression of the parts fitting together. So that way, if it gets in anything, it doesn't hurt anything like oil galleys and stuff. It'll still flow oil through it. Alright, it's the next day. I'm gonna start throwing this transmission back in there. I'm probably gonna kind of speed through the reinstallation just because this video is getting pretty long as it is, so I'll stop if there's any important parts we need to add to it, but I'll probably just speed up this whole portion. So with that, I'll get to it. Well, I think I got it put back together enough that we can give it a try. I didn't have the right air filter for it, so I had to take the snorkel out. Otherwise that little tube down in there hits that air cleaner. It's a longer one for like the sportsmen's and stuff. But I figured it's better than running it with no air filter in there. So we'll fire it up and see if it moves forward and backward, and then we'll continue putting it together the rest of the way. Well, it seemed to work good, so I'll continue putting it back together. I'll put you back on a time lapse for the rest of this until we're going out to test it out. Alright, I got it all put back together, and we'll take it out and go for a ride, test it out, and see how it works. Well, it ran and drove okay. It was kind of rev limiting because I had a dead battery in there, and these charging systems can't really keep up if they have a completely dead battery in them. So I strapped the jumper pack to the back of it and tested it out, and it ran fine with that on there. So that's probably going to do it for this video. I'll probably do a follow-up video doing a service on it, and maybe we'll tackle these front tires if I have a couple to put on there. I'll put a decent battery in it. But if you like this sort of thing, like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.